So first off, certainly the idea is not that we are even necessarily pushing full scale for wood production on a massive scale. I think it's almost we're discovering what the attitudes about wood really are is our first objective. Because we looked at the national survey data and it said like 20% of people, or like 15% of people of Hancock County burn with wood. Well, what we're finding is the number is a lot higher than that. We're finding, we'd go to people's houses, we knock on the door, say, hi ma'am, can we ask how you heat your home? She goes, sure, I heat with oil. Okay, do you heat with any wood stove? With any wood? Yeah, I heat with a little bit. How much do you heat with? 5 to 10 cords. I was like, 5 to 10 cords? That could basically heat you for the whole season. It's like, man, how often do you turn on your oil? It's like, oh, only when I'm not using only when the wood stove isn't high enough or something like that. So as you find out from that is that someone who probably to a national census taker said, I heat my house with oil, in reality, heats like 90% wood. And what we're also finding out is that even people who heat with oil say stuff like, we have so many examples of people who heat with oil who say, but God, do I wish I'm heating with firewood, for a multitude of reasons. So what we're sort of finding is, I don't have an exact number on it, but basically there's a high demand right now for firewood, but there's a lack of education for cordwood or pellets, sorry. So there's a high demand for cordwood or pellet eating, but there's really a lack of information, and people don't know what's the most efficient way to do this. A lot of people who are burning aren't necessarily doing it efficiently, and people want to be able to do it so that it's still a renewable source. So I guess in terms of the project, so while we are looking to encourage wood production, I would say it's not like an advocacy campaign. Really, it's discovering what the current situation is. Do people want wood? Where are they getting that wood? And then if people do want it, we want to give them resources and that sort of thing. If someone says, I burn with oil, and like that's just what I want to do, that's fine. And nowhere in our interviews are we then advocating for wood or something like that. We're just curious what and how people are burning, and then studying, is this a good thing? And we've sort of determined, it very well might be a good thing. It's a carbon neutral, it's renewable, there's a lot of culture tied up into it, that's keeping with the main culture. So in terms of not stepping on people's culture, I think while we do have our own biases and we have to recognize them, some of us in the group may very much believe wood is the way to go, and we should be honest about that, but at the same time I don't think, again, it's not an advocacy campaign, it's a study that's helping build connections for people, provide resources if they want to do those sort of things. So forums or community gatherings or just information campaigns and that sort of thing. So the Neighborhood Forestry Project is what my senior project was, and that was a project that had come out of the idea that, so a lot of people are burning or do want to burn wood, a lot of people source that wood from their land, so we started to look into forestry itself in Maine. And what we discovered is, you look at Maine, and it's 94% covered in forests. Of those forests, a plurality is privately owned. I think it's something like, and of that privately owned, like 33% of all Maine forests, whatever, are owned by small family forest owners, which are usually 1,000 acres or less. So what that means is you have a situation in Maine where there's no national government that's telling you how to manage these forests, with the exception of some national policies. There's no giant logging company that's, managing how the forests are cut down and that sort of thing. The decisions are in the hands of thousands of family farmers, or family forest owners. And particularly we started looking at, this is not my idea, this idea came out of discussions with foresters and landowners and that sort of thing. And they felt there was this missing gap. And these were forests that were like 10 acres or less, or around 10 acres, and they existed in places like Bar Harbor and Hancock County where it was a little bit more densely populated, and you had these rural sort of subdivisions where the lots were like too small for a forester, or like, a forester to really come in and make a profit off of it, but because they were divided up by property lines. But if you, looked at from above, like a bird or even a child's perspective, those property lines don't exist. And what you have instead is you have a neighborhood forest. You have a forest that you have a few houses in, but you can still identify a clear forest. So when you do that, suddenly you're looking at over 100 acres of forest. So the Neighborhood Forest Project is the idea that we wanted to encourage conversation among neighbors to start to view their properties not as their individual forest lots that provided this green curtain of privacy, but rather as a connected forest, because the actions that they take on their land, or inactions, like not managing at all, or managing extensively, are going to have an impact not only on their neighbors, but the larger forest social ecological system. So the idea of the project is to identify neighborhoods that kind of fit that standard of 10 acres or less, divided but viewed largely, you have 100 acres here, and start to talk to those neighbors. And so we talk to those neighbors and find out what practices they're doing and what their values in the forest are, and then we try to sort of bring them together through various ways and start to talk about, what are the shared values of the forest. And so if they decide, well, look, we all think we should be using more renewable sources and we want to manage these woods because this dense spruce fir is a fire hazard, and ecologically we want more, wildlife habitat, and we want to have trails that we can go through with our kids and stuff like that, we can help them develop a sort of collective management plan. But if the neighbors decide, we all hate each other and we want to build fences, well, maybe that's the best thing to do. That's the beauty of having control of the forest in Maine between so many different stakeholders, is that you have such a diversity of responses in terms of management that you might in fact actually have a very resilient forest social ecological system. And so from that you can sort of tell, going back to your original question of, even within that project, we're not advocating for managing your woodlots. We're advocating for starting conversations about what the forests mean to the residents of Hancock County. And are they a place that we should be deriving wood products? Letting it go natural, what does that really mean? What are the impacts? And starting these conversations of what is ecologically sound? How do we become a resilient sort of community? How does Maine become resilient in really tough economic times when oil prices are skyrocketing and climate change and volatile political situation? How do we survive and that sort of thing? And so for me, it's about having conversations. It's not about pushing an agenda. And some of the short-term goals I'd like to see out of the Neighborhood Forestry Project and both the Hancock County Firewood Project is, I think we could be burning more wood. I think there's enough social capital and demand to burn more wood because people want some sort of alternative. Mainers use more, I think, if I'm not correct, BTUs than any other state. Most other states are like among the top 5 or something. I have a graph in my head that I've seen, but I don't have the numbers. But they burn quite a lot, and a lot of the homes are fairly inefficient because there's old homes. So my short-term goal is I'd like to see a lot of managers get off oil because it's a source that's not local. So they have less control over those prices and that sort of thing, and no control over those prices and that sort of thing. And I'd like to see a sort of focus on creating home heating more efficiently. So if you're going to burn with wood, how to have an efficient stove and how to properly insulate your home. So that is sort of an education and advocacy piece I'd like to see come out of the project. I'd like to see, we're providing resources and engaging neighbors and people we've interviewed with information and guidance on how to do that. And a lot of that is not even, it's almost very human ecological actually, because it's not like we're experts on that, but we can connect people to resources and other people that we can start getting these things rolling. Another short-term goal is Maine's also very economically fairly economically poor, and a lot of people struggle with home heating. And one of the ways they've helped with that is LIHEAP is a federally funded and administered through the state heating assistance program. But there's been a lot of talk from both Democrats and Republicans that program could be cut with the upcoming budget talks. So we need to look at, how are we going to serve these low-income Maine families who have been relying on government assistance for heating their homes, because Maine is friggin' cold. You don't have heat out there, you could easily die. It's simple as that. It's a life and death situation we're dealing with. So going back, sort of short-term goal would be finding it could even possibly be a policy initiative that we put forward that would provide some sort of assistance or keep that sort of assistance that's happening for people getting home heating and making wood part of that portfolio. And sort of the reason we're pushing wood again is that it is a renewable and carbon neutral source. And if it is done, when I say harvesting wood and managing forests, I mean sustainably managing forests, using silviculture practices and that sort of thing. One of the more longer term goals I see of the project is that sort of meta level thing I was talking about. We're asking for I'm in a way trying to push for a paradigm shift. I see the way that we sort of view our woodlands as this green curtain of privacy, and it's just on the borderlands of our property, and we don't think about it and that sort of thing. In some ways, and that's fine, but in other ways, in facing the problems that we're facing in society, it might be more valuable if we start to see those connections. We see it as really it's a complex system, the forest, and how we relate to the forest. So if we see it not along the property lines, but more along the larger social ecological system, and a neighborhood is a starting place for that, and if we just get neighbors starting to talk to each other about how they're managing their woodlands and that sort of thing, then solutions to these complex problems we're facing become more feasible, because people are no longer thinking like individual consumers, but instead thinking like interconnected stakeholders in a larger system, a larger forest, if you will. So yeah, that's my larger term goal, is to get those conversations started. For me, conversations are not a waste of time, just because you're not, putting out a tangible piece of material. That conversation itself is building on something and is building something, and things will come out of that.